Good afternoon, everybody. We are live and recording. It's 1 o'clock. Thanks so much for joining us. We're literally just waiting 1 more minute before we're going to start. If anyone's having any difficulties with sound or vision, please drop us a quick note in the chat box on the bottom right hand side. Sometimes it's a bit difficult for us to tell if anyone's having any issues. So, like I say, thanks for joining us. We're going to get stuck into our 30-minute session and rattle through at a pretty quick pace. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ben Hollam. I'm the Managing Director and Founder at Q Content. We're a content agency based in Bath. Normally, when we run these events, I'm just introducing a guest speaker, but today the speaker is going to be me. So a little bit about me. I've been a marketing agency owner for 25 years now. That is shocking. And specializing in content for the last 10 of those years with Q, formerly known as M2 Bespoke, for those of you who've come across us before. Down in the bottom corner, we'll make us slightly bigger, you'll see Lauren.
Hi, everyone.
Lauren is our marketing and events manager. Lauren's going to be monitoring the questions or any questions that come in, and then when we get to the end, we'll run a quick Q&A. So she'll be posing quizmaster at that point and trying to catch me out, no doubt. So a couple of quick things before we get going. On the right hand side, as I say, there's a space there for any chat. So if you want to just say hi. Or as we're going through, if you've got any kind of good ideas or things that you've tried for yourselves along the topic that we're talking about today, and you want to drop them in there and share them with the group, that would be great. At the bottom of the page, you've got a Ask a Question tab. So at the end, we're going to put aside a few minutes for a Q&A. So if you have got questions that come up as you go along, then if you can drop them in there, then Lauren can pick them up and make sure that we try and cover them off at the end. And there's also a couple of polls at the bottom of your screen as well. So if you'd like to take part in that, that would be great. It's always useful information to have. So let's get into it. As I say, we've got 30 minutes. It will be a whistle-stop tour. There's quite a lot of information on some of the slides that we're going to skip through. We're probably going to spend 2 or 3 minutes on each slide that we could spend an hour on, but the video is available on demand afterwards, so don't worry if you've not picked up anything. And if there is anything specific that you want to get a bit more detail on, then either save it for the Q&A at the end, or if you want to discuss it with us offline, then just drop Lauren a message through the chat or via email, and we can arrange to have a conversation with you. So 10 ways to generate fresh ideas for online content. We're all aware that keeping up with the relentless demand for content is easier said than done, particularly if you're not compromising on quality and you're just trying to push content out. Back in the old days, as I would call it, before the kind of content as we know it, we still did content marketing in various forms, but it just wasn't as demanding. You had your sales material, you had advertising, you had PR, but you didn't have this kind of daily grind, the multiple social media channels screaming at you in the background that need to be fed. So it was a completely different kind of landscape in terms of the amount of content that you had to constantly be generating over and above your normal sales material and marketing material. And of course, before you get to actually produce anything, you need to have a constant stream of great ideas, which is frankly exhausting. I mean, it's, we do this all the time, and it's a challenge for everybody. If you're in a small team or you're a one-person marketing team, then it can be really, really challenging just constantly keeping this stream of ideas before you even get to the production stage. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to split into 2 sections. The bulk of the tips that we're going to cover are going to be talking about how to generate new ideas. And then towards the end, we're just going to talk briefly about how to be smarter and reduce the amount of new and fresh topics you actually need to keep coming up with, which of course has the same effect. It still takes the pressure off of you. So that's what we're looking to do. So I'm going to share screen here. I've got a couple of slides, which hopefully you can now see. Lauren, speak up if for any reason this is not showing up.
Good.
Good, good, good. Okay, so how to generate fresh topics. I always start with this, talking about the difference between content and product marketing. Whenever I speak to a marketing team who are expressing that they're struggling to come up with fresh ideas, or they use the phrase that they've run dry, the first thing I look to is whether they have a good understanding of the difference between content and product marketing. And you'd think it's obvious, but it is surprising how many times it's missed. And what I'll often find is if they are struggling.
Sorry, Ben, to interrupt you then. Your slides aren't showing now. They were, but mine have gone. It seems to share your screen properly, I think. It's to show your face.
Sorry, let me try and adjust it. Right, let's try that. Is that now working?
Yeah, but I think me and you are quite large on the screen, actually. There we go.
Now we should be there. Thank you. That's good catch. Sorry, people. So, as I was saying, content or product marketing. Often, if people don't quite understand the difference, what's happened is that they've defaulted to what marketers tend to do, which is kind of traditional marketing messages, which aren't sustainable. What do we want to say about us? What products or services do we offer? How long have we been doing it? What are our USPs? It's all very focused on ourselves. And the problem with that is there's only so many ways that you can cover that information. It's on your website, it's in your brochure, in your sales material. And when you're talking about regular daily, weekly content, it's just not sustainable. So when we talk about the difference with content marketing, we're talking about producing more neutral content, educational content, stuff that's going to inform people, influence them, that's going to position you as a credible expert. And when you do that, it widens the topic pool dramatically, because you're just looking at what's relevant if you kind of overlay your products and services, but resisting the temptation to sell. That as a starting point is going to make a huge difference in terms of coming up with topics, because you've moved away from we sell this and it does this, this and this. We are this company and we are great because. You're going to run out of ideas really quickly. And the quote on the screen there, advertising interrupts what people are trying to read, watch or share, whereas content marketing attempts to be what people read, watch or share. And that's a fundamental difference. And we can talk about that all day long, but if you can grasp that principle before you start, that's going to automatically make it easier to keep coming up with new topics. The next point is to do with audience mapping. Content ideation is always going to be a problem for you if you don't have a clear picture of who your audience is and the breakdown. And if you don't start with what they're interested in, again, talking about content versus product marketing, this will stop you from focusing too much on talking about yourselves and your own products and services. So you need to be thinking about individual personas. And if you haven't done this actual exercise of breaking down personas and who they are and what they look like, really humanize them. It makes it so much easier to put yourself in their shoes. So that allows you to start thinking about what are they interested in? What are their pain points? What are their challenges? What keeps them awake at night? Where and when do they like to consume content? Because that will influence what you push out. What format are they likely to prefer? Maybe that's different on different channels, but again, it's all going to make coming up with topics that much easier. And that will allow you to come up with topic ideas that cover different angles. If you're B2B, a financial director is going to be interested in a different angle than maybe a marketing director that's looking at what the product or service is going to allow him to achieve. Even if it's the same company and the same product, they're going to have different drivers, different things are going to float their boat. If it's a consumer, the young teenager who's going to wear an item isn't interested in the same information as the parent who's going to pay for it. So doing this exercise of mapping out your audience is really important. We do this a lot in the B2B context. If you start by defining the different types of organization, sector, size, geography, etc. For each of those different types, what are the typical job titles? Against each job title, what are the pain points? What are the educational content that they're going to need? You gradually start mapping out what your audience is going to be and the type of topics that they're interested in. From that, you can then produce a framework or a structure that defines topic themes, so not necessarily individual articles, but topic themes, channels, and formats, which will allow you to plan a calendar in advance without actually needing to decide the exact details of every single post that's going to go in it. But you start your week knowing that on a Monday, you're looking for a blog article on this theme. Maybe the next week, you're looking for an infographic that's on X thing. So it starts to focus your energy and your effort in a much more kind of focused way. It makes coming up with the topics easier. And I think just stopping that kind of Monday morning head scratching, you know, I need to post something. What am I going to do? You know, giving you control of rotating topics, etc., because it makes it all very visible. So that whole kind of audience mapping and then working that through to themes and a content calendar makes a huge difference when it comes up to the actual ideas process. Third point is using search data. So, you know, what are people actually searching for online? The content on your website should prioritize answering the questions that people are tapping into Google. It should concentrate on solving problems. So you'll sometimes hear the expression now, pain point SEO. If you just concentrate on writing content that addresses pain points, you're automatically ticking an SEO box for your site, but you're also generating ideas for content that are data-based, as opposed to you just sitting there and racking your brains and using common sense. And for SEO purposes, a long scrolling FAQ page with a couple of sentences won't cut it. So think about turning questions into guides. One of our clients shifted their whole strategy about a year ago, and they now produce long format guides, 1,000-word, 2,000-word guides on very granular subjects. But it means that they've got a massive pot of content topics that they can dive into, and they really make the most of them. And Google really likes it when you cover a topic comprehensively. So this takes some pressure off of you, because if you've got one good topic, instead of writing it once and moving on, you can think about a kind of ecosystem of related topics or covering the topic from different angles in different formats. And if you do that, you're going to get several pieces of content out of every one kind of main topic, but you're also, of course, going to help your search engine optimization. So it's a double hit. Editorial panels, the next thing that we're going to talk about. Why take on all of the pressure and all of the burden yourself for coming up with ideas when you can extract ideas from a wider group of people who have got different perspectives? Customer service, sales team, product development, events, directors in the business, whatever it looks like within your organization. And a few tips on this, you know, one, try and find willing participants. If you've got people being dragged, kicking and screaming, it's not going to work in the first place. But get them involved at an early stage. Ideally, when you're doing the planning, your audience mapping, your themes, because they're going to bring something to that conversation anyway, which is going to help you plan. And if they're involved and they're engaged and they've bought in at the early stage, they're much more likely to stay with it and stay engaged on a long-term basis. Lots of people complain that everyone's keen to get involved at the beginning, but a few months in, suddenly they're not responding to your email messages. Another tip is, don't send an email out once a month that says, got any ideas for content, because their heads explode. I've seen it so many times. It's like when someone puts you on the spot and says, what's your favorite song ever? Suddenly you can't think of any song that you actually like. It just doesn't work. So we find that if you can agree specific questions or prompts that they've already agreed would be useful to them. So, you know, maybe with the customer services team, One of our clients, the team leader just kept a spreadsheet, and he just jotted on it any kind of interesting questions that his team got asked, or any recurring questions, and then emailed it across to the marketing team once a month when they were prompted for it. The sales team, if you ask a salesperson, what's the common hot topics that your clients are ranting and raving or moaning about this month, they'll have a good idea. And that can all feed into content. What events are coming up, or product launches are coming up. So extract information, but have some agreed framework or agenda in place, and people are going to be much more likely to contribute if you do that. Including a quote from the person or a name check in the content. People do like to have their ego stroked, and if you get them involved in that way, and they're going to get a mention in the article, or maybe they even contribute a bit more information and they're attributed as the author of the article, that's another great way of keeping people engaged. Again, it's just human nature. And making it fun, not a chore. Again, one of our clients had a competition running for the person who had the most of their ideas actually got used on the blog at the end of the year, and bottle of champagne or something. It's just something that makes it a bit more fun and keeps people engaged. It's all about taking the burden off of one person, and it's going to give you a much more varied pool of content ideas as well. So point 5 is a little bit of a contradiction, having told you at the outset that we shouldn't be talking too much about our own products and services. And yes, that is true. However, we all know that in recent years, people are buying a lot more products online and getting more comfortable with doing that. But they're also doing a lot more research online in both the B2B and the B2C context. A lot more research is done online, even if the final purchase is made in a store or on the high street. And one of the knock-on effects of the whole COVID-19 pandemic over the last year is that obviously more people have been pushed online than ever. And even if they're not buying the product or service at the end of the day, they do expect to find pretty much everything they need to make a decision on whether they're going to buy from you online. You can't leave gaps that you would fill in when they pick up the phone or when they come into the store. They need to be able to find everything. And this is another great avenue to explore for content. So get granular, think about the detail, think about what processes are involved and what materials, what people you've got behind the scenes, what technology you use. I was chatting with another agency owner whose client did road resurfacing. And apparently there's about 6 different methods they use to choose which road surface is right in which situation. And normally they would never, ever have that conversation with a client, because that's just like, well, don't worry about that. That's what you're paying us to do. But now people want to know that stuff when they're deciding, are they going to use you or a competitor? If you don't give them everything they need, someone else will. So think about the detail, anything that you can use, little graphics that, visualize the process that you go through. So meet the teams, all these types of things will really help. They'll help in terms of your sales, in terms of the actual business objectives, but in terms of taking the pressure off of you and filling out your content plan, another great place to look. Point 6 is using topical news, surveys and reports. The great thing about using topical content is it drives itself. You are not needing to generate new ideas. You just need some themes. And you're then just using stuff which is out there in the public domain already. So, the simple process for this is define the topics, find yourself a list of credible sources to check regularly. So if I said to you, what would you type into Google if you were going to keep up to date with with breaking news within your industry? What would you type in? What sources would you use? Set up some alerts, Google alerts, Google News, Feedly. There's all sorts of free services out there. When you find your piece of industry news that's of interest and is relevant to what you do, you write up a summary of that content. You can attribute where it came from, the original source, recent survey published in, but then top and tail it. So, add a brief comment, add your opinion, add an insight. That might be a very short little paragraph. It might be that you go on and you write double the length of the article with your opinion on it, but you haven't had to think about the original topic idea. You just had to embellish or summarize what was already there. You know, the topics that you don't use to write something, you can just share as curated posts to keep your social media going. And a lot of the time you might find that something sparks an idea for a whole new piece of content around that topic. It just becomes a starting point, basically. So it drives itself. It's a great way of keeping up a regular drip feed of content that you don't have to generate the ideas for. Point 7, competitor analysis, or an audit of your competitors. We're not talking about copying and plagiarizing everything your competitors do. What we are talking about is what can you learn from them? So, you know, what are they doing well that you could replicate, adapt, amend? What are they doing but not doing well that's, you know, either poorly executed or is not getting engagement and you can improve on it? Are they targeting an audience or a channel that isn't even on your radar yet? That would open up a whole new field of topic ideas for you. And are they producing content that would work better in another format? Now, are they writing blogs on topics that would be much better as an infographic or as a video? You know, any of these things are things that you might be able to learn from looking at your competitors that, again, open up new avenues for content and things that you can learn and apply to your own content. So again, we're going to move on. I told you it would be quick. Events. I always call them the gift that keeps on giving. By events, it doesn't have to be something like this. It doesn't need to be a webinar or something where you're speaking at your audience. We've had a lot of our clients having great success with online panels and roundtables, and I say online because that's what we're all doing at the moment, but it could be physical or virtual. Now, when you pull in a group of people to take part in an event, it gives you an opportunity to engage with suppliers, with customers, position your company as a thought leader, but more importantly, it drives content. It's kind of self-perpetuating because you've got content that you can put out around the topic before the event. Obviously, you're going to publicize the event. You're going to say thanks to everyone for taking part after the event. You do a video of the event itself. You produce content based on the information that came out. So maybe you do a white paper, and then there's a couple of standalone infographics or whatever it might be. You then have spin-off ideas which come from that content. You know, somebody discussed something and it opened up a whole nother angle or a direction that you couldn't explore during the event, but that gives you a spark for another piece of content. And it also opens up collaboration opportunities. So, you know, again, it can really help if you're collaborating with a partner supplier or even a customer to produce content or produce a case study or something along those lines. Again, it's sharing the burden, it's opening up to fresh ideas. So we did this recently with a client of ours, Wiley. I'm just going to play the opening snippet here. They did a round table where they pulled in some industry leaders to discuss a topic. They produced this video from it. They then produced a white paper. There was, I think, 2 infographics and a series of about 3 blogs. And we also identified 6 completely different spin-off topics, each of which generated a paper and an infographic and a video and kind of multiple pieces of content. So we've probably got about 20 pieces of content all in all as a result of doing this.
Sorry, Ben, I don't think we can hear.
Okay, I'm back. I don't think you can hear that anyway. But it's you know, it's a way of generating a whole ton of content around the topic. So we're going to move on. Point number 9 is a really obvious one. Use the right tools. Lots of them are free. Probably the first 4 or 5 here we use. Answer the Public we use a lot. It's just a way of finding out what are people actually typing into Google, and it'll give you a whole load of suggestions. SEMrush have a free level of service, which includes a lot of the tools that you would need for content ideation. Again, you put in a topic and it suggests a whole load of kind of variations and things that people might be asking around it. Lots of the tools within Google, Search Console, Trends, Keyword Planner, etc., that you can use. Looking on your social channels, advanced searches, tracking hashtags, mentions, what are people talking about? Paid things like HubSpot, blog topic generator. There's loads of tools that you can use. Some will be great for you, some you'll go in there and it just isn't quite right. You need to kind of tinker with them, but it's well worth exploring them again, just to try and get a bit more data and a bit more assistance when it comes to coming up with these topics. So finally, we're going to look at making what you have go further by reducing the number of new ideas you need, reusing, recycling, upcycling, reusing, refreshing and repurposing content. So the first thing you need to do here is an audit. You need to go back over everything that you've produced, and there are varying tools that you can use. And there is an article on our website blog, which is a guide to doing a content audit. And we're going to send that out as a guide to anybody that wants it over the next week or so. So going through your content, killing stuff that's just not relevant and valid anymore. There are some SEO benefits to that, which are covered off in that guide. Reposting content, which is older but perfectly relevant. Updating and refreshing content, and repurposing, putting it into new formats. So you shouldn't have any one-hit wonders. If you are posting every piece of content that you produce once and then moving on, then you're just making a rod for your own back in terms of the amount of new content you've got to keep producing. Think about how quickly a piece of content disappears or gets buried in your LinkedIn or your Twitter feed. So every piece of content should be reposted multiple times, as in different times of the day, different times of the week, the weekend maybe, the month and the year. However long that piece of content is relevant for, it can be re-shared. Just republishing on your website. If you've got a piece of content that's 7-8 months old and it's buried on page 4, 5, 6 of your blog in the archive and it's perfectly relevant, take it down and repost it so it goes back up to the top of your feed again. Chances are loads of people won't have seen it. You know, this is not just constantly, showing people the same bit of content over and over again. People, a large amount of people just won't see the content that you put up because it got lost in their feed. They didn't log in that day, whatever it might be. It's all about timing. So no one-hit wonders. Get your content up there as many times as you can and get some variety, because people will engage at different times. And presenting the same topic from different angles, multiple formats. So different written formats, blogs, lists, guides, case studies, visual formats, infographics, videos, ebooks, audio. One of our clients has had great success because they've got a technical and quite long format editorial and producing full read-through audio versions, because their audience will listen to it on the way to work in the car, or cycling into work, and then they'll press pause and then they'll come back and listen to it again later on, and they're listening to the full white paper but just having someone read it to them, and it's been really, really popular. So coming at things from different angles. We did an infographic once which was called 15 ways to approach a single topic, and that wasn't even talking about different formats like visual. It was just talking about how not to, frequently asked questions, top tips, meet the expert, comparisons, X versus Y. So when you do all of these things, you don't have to put them all out at the same time, but maybe you have a how-to guide on the topic, and then in a couple of months' time, you do the same topic, but as a top tips. And a couple of months down the line, you do a meet the expert talking about their experience and covering similar ground. So, they've not all got to go up simultaneously, and it's not going to look right. Spread them out, but it means that when you're planning your content calendar, you'll have things that are plugged in already 2 months down the line, 6 months down the line, a year down the line. And again, you don't need to keep coming up with as many topics. Now, I know we said there's going to be 10 tips, but I added an 11th, which is just a kind of overarching here, which is about working smarter and not harder. Yeah. Don't spend so much time thinking of new ideas and producing more and more and more content that nobody sees. Put as much time and effort into distributing your content, into pushing it out, amplifying it, whether that's paid or organic. Make the content that you have work harder for you before you move on to the next thing. And metrics and analysis. Again, don't waste your time coming up with more and more content ideas for stuff that didn't get any engagement. It didn't work. Focus all of your efforts where you get the biggest bang for your buck and spend your time there. So less is more. That can make a massive difference. We're all guilty of pushing out content that actually, if we looked, wasn't really worthwhile. So don't waste your time on it. So that's our tips. As I promised, it was a fairly breathless run through, but I think it's good for all of us. It just kind of refreshes in our minds. We all reach that point where we're kind of, what are we going to do now? And having some sort of a checklist like this that's readily available to us, just as a prompt, just to refresh our minds, to think, okay, no, have we thought of this? Have we set up an editorial panel? You know, have we thought about an event? Have we used our tools? You know, these are all things that can be go-tos. And you know, if you've got all of these things, it just avoids your over-reliance on any one source of ideas, and starts to kind of spread that load. So I'm going to come out of the screen, if I can successfully do that. Close that one down. There we go. Okay, so for those of you that haven't run out of breath and are still here, if there are any questions that you wanted to feed in, it looks like we have got something. So hit me, Lauren, and I will endeavour to confuse everyone even more.
No problem. Yeah. So first question we have is, how often should you be posting?
Okay, that's one of those why is the sky blue and how long is a piece of string questions. But you can definitely post too much, and there's definitely a point when you are bombarding your audience, and we found that, especially if the quality or the relevance is dropping in order to push that much out. What I would say is think about the size of your business and the size of your audience. You know, if you've got 25 followers on social and you're posting 15 times a day, it's not rocket science to think that's too much. Think about how much of value do you have to say. So if you've got constant things and they're valuable, great. Measure the engagement, because it might be that there are only actually specific times of the day or the week that people are engaging. So you're pushing out 5 bits of content every week and only 2 of them are any use because your audience are only bothered on a Wednesday lunchtime and a Saturday evening. And so you could do 2 things in a week. And also your metrics will tell you when there's kind of a tipping point. And we had this. I mean, we at one point were putting out content on a daily basis. And in the end, we came back to it being kind of once or twice a week, because there was a tipping point where more content made no difference on the engagement. And then there was a point where we went backwards, because it's like blatantly people were thinking, oh, not you again. So, you know, I can't answer that question for you, but that's what you need to be thinking about. And having a look at your competitors can be a guide. You might get a feel for, you know, for that. I think whatever your size, I would normally start by assuming that once a week should be a minimum. And I would assume that multiple times per day is probably too much. There will always be someone who breaks that rule, but I think, you know, generally, even for our smaller clients, we tend to say to them, try and get something new up on your site once a week. If it goes longer than that, kind of what's going to keep people coming back, I guess. So, yeah, hopefully that gives you some pointer. Anything else?
Yeah, brilliant. One more. Do you think you should produce the same content for different channels, or should content be unique for each channel?
Both is the answer to that question. So some content will be relevant to more than one channel. So, for example, pretty much everything that goes on our LinkedIn will be shared automatically through Twitter. However, Instagram is a completely different beast altogether, and tends to have its own themes, because we don't push thought leadership on Instagram. We tend to do more kind of lightweight, humorous stuff from around the office, that kind of thing. So I think when you're doing your content calendar and you're planning each piece of content, you should have a tick box of what channels it's appropriate for. And that will then enable you'll have certain topics you want to cover, and then you need to think about which channel it goes through. And there might be times when you specifically think we really need to have some content for this channel, and that might kind of steer where you're going. So the reality is a bit of both is the incredibly unhelpful answer to that.
I think that's it now, Ben.
That was it on the questions. That either means I've confused everyone completely, or I will choose to believe that we covered the topic so thoroughly there were no more questions.
Oh.
So thanks everybody for joining us. We almost made it on time, probably with the slight delay for the technical issues. This video will be available on demand. So what we will do is we'll send the link around to everyone who registered, just so that you've got it available. If you do have any questions afterwards, then please feel free to fire them through to us one way or the other. And we will be sending around a guide as well on the audit process for those of you that are interested. We will be having another event next month, so look out for it. It's on Tuesday the 15th, Lauren?
Yeah.
Tuesday the 15th, so just before the school holidays, which is all about business leaders, so owners, MD, CEOs, and why it's important that they build their online and social profile, the risks and the pitfalls, why it's so important, and some tips on how they can do that. So if there is anyone in your organization that you feel that would be useful to, then feel free to share that with them. But thank you for joining. Hope you enjoyed that, and hopefully we will catch up with you all again, and enjoy the rest of your week. Cheers.
Bye.